back. Today we're going to be reading some more Encyclopedia Brown Boy Detective, the first book by Donald Sobel, written in 1963. So let's continue.
We're now on to the case of the bank robber. $3.50, exclaimed Encyclopedia as he finished counting the money in the treasury of the Brown Detective Agency. Business is booming. At $0.25 a case, that's pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should put that money in a bank. Well, I like this Sally Kimball person, whom Encyclopedia had made his bodyguard and junior partner. Money isn't safe in a shoebox. Maybe you're right, said Encyclopedia. Sometimes even shoes aren't safe in a shoebox. It would look awful if a detective agency was robbed. The partners talked it over. They decided to take the money downtown to a bank and start a savings account. Very wise. It was too far to ride on their bicycles, so they took the bus. They got off near the Corning National Bank on Beach Street. As they stepped out of the bus, they heard the sound of shooting.
My.
At first, Encyclopedia thought the bus maybe had backfired. A moment later, though, he saw a man in the doorway of the bank. The man wore a hat. A handkerchief covered the lower part of his face. In one hand, he held a yellow paper bag, and with the other, he waved a gun. Somebody was shouting, "Hold up! Hold up!" And then all at once, everybody was running, trying to get out of the robber's way. The man with the gun turned and fled. In his haste, he did not seem to look where he was going. He ran into a beggar wearing dark glasses and carrying a white cane and tin cup. The beggar's cane and cup flew into the street. The robber and the beggar fell to the sidewalk. They rolled about together for a few seconds before the robber broke away and got to his feet. He raced down the street just as a police car drew up before the bank. Chief Brown and one of his officers leaped out of the car and ran after the robber. There's a lot going on in the first part of the book. "We caught him," said Chief Brown at dinner that night. "He led us a merry chase, but we got him. The trouble is we can't charge him with the robbery." "But why not?" Mrs. Brown demanded. "Yes, Dad, why not?" Encyclopedia asked. "Wasn't the money he stole in that yellow paper bag he was carrying?" Chief Brown laid down his fork. "Do you know what we found in that yellow bag of his? Money? No, a loaf of white bread. He resisted police officers, but I don't know how long I can keep him in jail for that." "Are you sure you caught the right man, Dad?" Encyclopedia asked. "We'll have a hard time proving it," said Chief Brown. "No one can identify him, and nobody saw the robber's face. He wore a handkerchief over his nose and mouth, and his hat was pulled down over his forehead and eyes. This man we picked up is wearing a brown suit, and the teller at the bank says the robber wore a suit the same color. That's interesting, a brown suit. And of course, there is the yellow bag, but there is no money. Does the man you picked up have any distinguishing features?" Encyclopedia wanted to know. "Well, he has a pug nose and a scar running down one cheek. But remember, no one saw the robber's face," said Chief Brown. "I can hold him in jail overnight for resisting a police officer, and that's about all." "I never saw a beggar in Idaville before today," said Encyclopedia thoughtfully. "Oh, the blind man," said Chief Brown. "He seems like a nice old fellow. He calls himself Blind Tom. I hated to tell him it's against the law to beg here." "The poor man," said Mrs. Brown. "Won't the Salvation Army help him?" "Yes," replied Chief Brown. "But he said he likes being on his own. He promised to leave town tomorrow." "Where is he staying?" asked Encyclopedia. "At the old Martin Inn," answered Chief Brown. "One of those buildings in the road down by the railroad tracks. Why do you ask? Have you got an idea about this case, Leroy?" "No," mumbled Encyclopedia. Mrs. Brown looked hurt. She had come to expect her son to solve a case before dessert. After dinner, Encyclopedia walked over to Sally's house. "I have to work this evening," he said. "I may need you. Do you want to come?" "Oh boy, do I," Sally sang out. The sky was growing dark as the two detectives rode their bicycles down a dingy block west of the railroad station. "Who lives here?" asked Sally as Encyclopedia stopped in front of a run-down hotel. "Blind Tom, the beggar. He'll be leaving town tomorrow, and that's why we have to see him this evening." "Do you think he can help us?" asked Sally. "I think so. A blind man sees with his hands, replied Encyclopedia. Remember how the beggar rolled with the robber on the sidewalk? If he felt the robber's face through the handkerchief, he might know him again. I get it, said Sally. If he could feel the man's face again, he might know whether the man your father caught is really the robber. Exactly, answered Encyclopedia. Gosh, said Sally, I hope he hasn't left town yet. Inside the hotel, the desk clerk gave the two young detectives some help. Blind Tom lived alone, and his room was number 214. By the way, I'm not sure you could get away with that today. You can't just walk into a hotel and ask the desk clerk to give you somebody's room. But back then, I guess that was okay. Sally and Encyclopedia climbed the dark, creaky stairs. This sounds spooky. To the second floor. They knocked on the door number 214. Nobody answered. Look, the door's not shut, whispered Sally. Shall I? Encyclopedia nodded. Yes. Sally pushed the door until it swung open so they could look into the room. The room was small and shabby. Against the far wall stood an iron bed. A small reading lamp cast its light upon a copy of the Idaville Daily News that lay open on the pillow. Suddenly, the tapping of a cane sounded in the hall. Tap, tap, tap. Blind Tom came right up behind Sally. Is someone here? He asked. I haven't had a visitor in a long time. I wasn't expecting anyone tonight, but it's nice to have you. He lifted his cane. Won't you come in? No thanks, said Encyclopedia. He pushed Sally down the hall and hurried her down the stairs. She didn't even have a chance to catch her breath until they were outside the hotel. Why the big rush? Sally asked. I thought you were going to ask Blind Tom if he could recognize the man who robbed the bank this afternoon. I don't even have to ask him, replied Encyclopedia. Blind Tom knows the robber because Blind Tom helped in the robbery. How did Encyclopedia know this?
Tell us in the comments. We have another one.
Oh. Second. The case of the happy nephew. The Browns were having leftover meatloaf for dinner one night when the telephone rang. It must be important, said Mrs. Brown worriedly. Otherwise, why would anyone call during the dinner hour? A long time ago. She hurried to the telephone. In a moment, she called to her husband. It's Officer Carlson, dear. Chief Brown went to the telephone and spoke with his officer for several minutes. When he returned to the dining room, he wore a frown and his gun. The Princess Bake Shop on Vine Street was robbed less than an hour ago, he said. I'll have to go out. Any clues, Dad? Asked Encyclopedia. We have an eyewitness, answered his father. A man passing the bakery says he saw John Abbott running out the door. Hasn't John Abbott been in prison? Asked Mrs. Brown. 5 years ago, said Chief Brown. But he's gone straight ever since he came out. The eyewitness only got a quick look at the robber. He might be mistaken. Chief Brown shrugged. Still, I suppose I'll have to stop by and question John. I sure hope he has a good alibi. Oh, I felt sorry for John.
Explain what an alibi is.
An alibi is something that you have that says that you weren't. So the police might say, you were here at this time. They would go, no, I have an alibi. The alibi is I was over here at this other time, and there are either witnesses or I have a piece of paper that has a date stamped on it or something that would prove that they were not at the other place. So it's kind of proof, I guess. It's proof that they weren't guilty, I guess. Can I go with you? Cried out Encyclopedia. May I go with you? His mother said, because remember she taught
Grammar
in high school before she got married. And drink your milk first. May I go with you, Dad? Encyclopedia asked, and he gulped his milk. Come along if you like, said his father, but you will have to stay in the car and be quiet. I'll be as quiet as a cat at a dog show, promised Encyclopedia. That would be quiet. He sat quietly beside his father in the police car on the drive to the house where John Abbott lived with his sister and her family. Staying in the car won't be so bad, Encyclopedia decided. The car will be a lot closer to the case than our dining room. On the west side of town, his father stopped the car. Here's the house. Encyclopedia saw a small white house in need of paint. An old yellow car stood in the shaded driveway. "There's John," said Chief Brown. A tall young man had come out of the house. He was carrying a barefoot boy about a year and a half old. Chief Brown reminded Encyclopedia to sit quietly in the car, and then he got out and walked toward John Abbott. "Put the child down, John," Chief Brown called, "and keep your hands where I can see them." John Abbott started to lower the barefoot baby onto the sharp stones of the gravel driveway, and then he changed his mind and put the child on the front fender of the yellow car and raised his hands. "What's this all about, Chief?" he asked. "Robbery," replied Chief Brown. "You were seen running out of the Princess Bake Shop on Vine Street an hour ago. The door was broken and all the money in the cash register was stolen." It's interesting, back then he was able to go and visit this guy that he thinks may have been the thief all by himself, no backup. He just walks up and talks to him. I don't think they could get away with that today. John Abbott laughed. "I wasn't near Vine Street an hour ago. Why, all day—" "Look out!" shouted Chief Brown. He leaped for the baby. The child had climbed onto the hood of the yellow car. He smiled and gurgled happily, when suddenly he stood up and walked close to the edge of the hood. Chief Brown caught him just as he started to fall off the car. "Thanks, Chief," said John Abbott. "He's my nephew. I'll hold him." No, I'll hold him," said Chief Brown. "Just tell me where you were today." "Anyone who says he saw me coming out of the Princess Bake Shop an hour ago is either crazy or a liar," said John Abbott. "Can you prove you were somewhere else? In other words, do you have an alibi?" "I was miles away," said John Abbott. "Since 8 o'clock this morning, I've been driving this car. I drove down from Sundale Shores. I got here just 5 minutes before you came." Chief Brown looked at his watch. "You drove 600 miles in less than 12 hours, he said. "Did you stop around 6 o'clock and talk to anyone? Maybe there's somebody we can check your story with." "No, not around 6 o'clock, said John. "I stopped for gas and a hamburger about 4:30, and then I drove straight through. I didn't break any speed limit, and it had nothing to do with any bake shop robbery." "I would like to think you're telling the truth," said Chief Abbott. "I am. I've gone straight, believe me," said John Abbott. "All right," said Chief Brown. "I'll have to question the eyewitness who says he saw you. Maybe it will turn out that he isn't sure." Chief Brown put the baby in John Abbott's arms and walked back to the police car. "I heard and saw everything," said Encyclopedia. "How come you didn't arrest him?" "Well, because he says he was driving from Sundale Shores when the robbery took place," answered Chief Brown. "He got here just 5 minutes before we came. I can't prove he is lying, at least not yet." He slipped into the seat beside Encyclopedia and started the car. "Listen to me, Leroy," he said. "Our eyewitness may have made a mistake. He may have seen a man who only looked like John Abbott. A good police officer doesn't put people in jail without more proof than that." "I believe the witness," said Encyclopedia. "John Abbott didn't just drive in from Sundale Shores in that old yellow car, and I can prove he didn't." "What was the proof?"
Again, tell us in the comments. Thank you so much for watching today. Bye!